All right, we're back at the 2017 Grey Cup Summit, brought to you by Polaris Health and sponsored by All Sport Insurance, division of Macleod. And this is a great opportunity for us. For those who are from the nation's capital, very familiar with the lady beside me, that is Lisa Macleod, MP for Nepean Carleton. For those who are beyond our boundaries, we're going to hit on a subject matter that's very near and dear to your heart, and it's Rowan's Law. Now, before we get to the law, though, let's first talk about Rowan Stringer, the wonderful person, the multi-sport athlete, who unfortunately we lost due to second impact issues from a concussion.
Yeah, Rowan Stringer was 17 years old, and she had played ringette and rugby. She played for two rugby teams, her school team as well as the Barhaven Scottish Rugby Club. And she had multiple concussions in 1 week, and the final one actually sent her to our local Children's Hospital of Eastern Ontario, CHEO, and her mom and dad would have to make that difficult decision to say goodbye. And she became an organ donor, which is somewhat overlooked because of all the work that the family has been doing on concussions. And it was really tragic, and it really rocked our city. And that's when her mom and dad came to see me about a year after there had been a coroner's inquest, making 49 different recommendations into how we treat, deal, and educate people about concussions.
We're going to get into the need for a national concussion protocol, but let's first talk about the circumstances, because we would talk about awareness, and awareness is key to prevention. Rowan had a jamboree type of experience with her team. They had a series of rugby games. On the last game of the day, she suffered a head injury. Wasn't quite sure if it was a concussion, and like a lot of athletes, decided to just suck it up and go.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things, and we're starting to see that cultural change now, but I think in Rowan's case, she didn't tell her mom and dad, didn't tell her coaches, and now I think that there's a great deal more awareness for how we look at a child that's been concussed because, quite frankly, of her experience and what happened to Rowan. And so she there were text messages where Rowan said she was going to continue to play, and her friends sort of knew, but they didn't realize that they had a role to play in preventing her death, and that's a shame, and that really was a big responsibility for so many 16 and 17-year-olds that she played with.
Yeah, and we know that the buddy system's been introduced to a lot of sports, so that the teammates who are probably closer to their friend and also interact more on a bench or on the game experience, because the coach is so busy, oftentimes things get overlooked. The buddy system is a great mechanism, a great tool to create a sense of awareness. But she was a fantastic athlete.
Yeah, she was multi-sport.
The idea of being a leader on that team, and that often plays into the decision-making process where my team needs me. So even though I have a headache, and only headache because, let's face it, diagnosing a concussion is not something you can do every day. She stepped up and decided she wanted to continue to play.
Yeah.
And it felt like it was the right thing to do, whereas now that I think the pendulum, as you mentioned, is changing and moving, so that the right thing to do is to step out.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that because Rowan's parents, as you know, Gordon and Kathleen, have been incredibly courageous and strong in sharing what happened to them and trying to prevent this from happening again, and that is a fatality. And we were able to bring along some pretty good pro athletes, yourself included, Ken, as well as I see Al Sharon here, one of the world's greatest rugby players of all time, and Eric Lindros, who was just inducted last year into the Hockey Hall of Fame. And Eric came to Queen's Park with me and the Stringers, and he put it this way, that 13-year-old girl that's playing ringette, that game, that championship game, to her is exactly the same as trying to win the Stanley Cup. And then you have to think about that. I have to remember that when I was 13 years old and playing for Team Nova Scotia in ringette, that was exactly what I thought. I thought I was destined to play that game, and so no matter what, I had to be there for my teammates. But one of the things that we've learned, and we're working a lot, we've now sort of transitioned just from Rowan's Law into Rowan's Legacy, and we're working with the Concussion Legacy Foundation. I'm happy to see Samantha Bureau here today, and Tim Fleischer. And we have a program that was launched first in the United States, but now it's in Canada, and it's called Team Up, Speak Up. And it really is about young athletes like my 12-year-old daughter telling her friends that if they fall down and they hit their head, there's a possibility that they may have a brain injury. And it's up to them to do the same for her. I mean, that doesn't take away, I'm a trainer on a hockey team myself. My daughter plays 2 teams. I've had to diagnose or send a kid for diagnosis with concussion and keep a child out of play, even during the playoffs. Their health is too important. And to any parent that I would say that, like me, loves the sport of hockey or loves soccer and loves rugby, you'd never want to be in that position where Rowan's parents are. And so that next game isn't as important as the next 10 years of their life.
To build on the notion of awareness, though, by being more aware, we don't go and make that emotional decision, say all sports, contact sports is bad for children. The awareness is where you can eliminate those injuries, create that knowledge, that base of knowledge, so that more kids enjoy an enhanced experience in their sport, and also avoid putting themselves in that position.
So there was a debate here actually after Rowan passed away that maybe we should stop playing rugby, maybe we should stop playing hockey, and Gordon Stringer was very clear, no, we still need sport. The thing is, how do we approach it as a trainer, not as a politician, but as a trainer on the bench or on the ice, and I have a kid that falls and maybe breaks their leg or has a concussion, how do I deal with that? Hockey Canada has been very good in putting those protocols in place, and so we know what our return to play is, and we also know the questions that we need to ask. So that needs to happen in every sport at a national level, and we have to have those protocols in place, and we have to shift the culture from parents thinking that, I paid almost $1,000 to put my kid through hockey, so you're going to play no matter what. Well, you wouldn't play with a broken leg, and you wouldn't play with a broken arm, so why would you play with a traumatic brain injury when it could be fatal? When it may not be fatal today, but you may end up with CTE or ALS or Parkinson's. And so I think it's a really important conversation that we have. And so what we need to do is shift the culture, and it starts with the kids. And parents are very much a big part of this. But what I've seen, and I can say this as an amateur coach, like very amateur, but I've seen that the base is there for us now, and it might not have been 5 years ago. So I think that to the credit of our sports associations, they're there. And now, because we have Rowan's Law in place, the Ministry of Tourism, Culture and Sport in the province of Ontario is taking this seriously, and I suspect we're going to see another piece of legislation that will govern youth sport in Ontario.
So the P word is protocol. When do we, let's put our thoughts on that, when will there be a national concussion protocol?
Well, Lindros and I,
what will it take?
Well, I think, look, we've been calling for it, myself, Tim, and Eric. Eric and I wrote a joint op-ed about a year and a half ago, and suggesting that needs to happen. That should happen at the federal level, and we don't have that yet. I can't control that, but we have also written to each of the health ministers as well as the sport ministers in Canada and said, look, we've started here in Ontario. We've got Canada's first concussion-related legislation. Every jurisdiction in the United States has concussion legislation, and only Ontario is there in Canada. So we need to do that, and I think we need to, because look, I think your ankle will probably heal, but your brain might not, and so I think we need to start taking this extremely seriously. And again, if one child has died from this, we need to act, and we need to prevent it.
Yeah, and worth noting, at Lisa's golf tournament, and you invited me, and I was able to get there before going off and coaching a Tyke football team, the Nepean Eagles. There's my shout out to the Nepean Eagles. But
then I got to get the Nepean Wildcats in there.
There you go. It didn't dawn on me until that moment that I've joined the movement to discuss concussions, and I've donated, for those who don't know in the room, I've donated my brain to the Boston University program. My wife says they're not going to find anything, but
I had a joke in there too, but I didn't want to go there.
I did that, and it didn't dawn on me, but subconsciously, I think I did it because when I was 4, and I was 5, and I had a sister who was 4. She was riding a bike that was too big for her, and she had fallen and she banged her head, and we just thought, okay, and she went to the hospital, and the doctor said, hey, parents, go home, we'll keep her overnight. And they called right away when they got home, said, get back to the hospital, and by then they had lost her.
Yeah.
And so you start thinking about that, because now that I have 3 young children, and I don't want to be overly cautious, but at the same time, accountability is going to be awfully important, and making sure people are responsible and making the right decisions in what is a very emotional framework.
Yeah.
Because Tyree's been there, where star football player, we need you, right? Playing with a couple of broken vertebrae, but hey, we need you to win the game.
Yeah.
What's more important at the end of the day, the game or health?
And I think the shift is happening now that it's
Yeah.
health. And I think it took some strong leaders like yourself, like Tim, like Al, like Eric, to sit there and say, enough is enough. This
Yeah.
and you need to understand too, all of you pro athletes, that you are role models to so many kids. To kids that are rushing home on Saturday night to watch you on television.
Yep.
And so when you speak and say, I need to take my health seriously, they listen. And so one of the things the recent concussion symposium that you and I were at, that was hosted by the Concussion Legacy Foundation, we had some kids there, and it was incredibly important for those kids to sit there and see you as people and not just the person that's the star on TV, and tell them that their health is important, because at the end of the day, we're gonna make groundwork on concussions, because kids playing sports are going to say, oh, I can't mess with a head injury. And they're going to have to, and they're going to take responsibility for themselves. Because I'm a mother of a 12-year-old who's here today. I wanted her to hear all this. And sometimes I can say things, but I don't necessarily know if she's listening to me. Yeah.
That's just the
She
natural
might listen to
symbiotic
Ken of
relationship.
Rare, who
I'm
she
not
sees
sure if
on
she's listening to me.
TV.
She keeps calling me Kevin, so I'm not sure how that works. Well,
I
Lisa,
told her to do that just to trip you
listen,
up.
thank you so much
you.
for your work through Rowan's Law, and the work that lays ahead on the horizon for you. It's both an exciting time because we're seeing progress, but also a disappointing time because it comes at the expense of a young athlete that unfortunately we had lost.
Yeah, well, listen, thank you. And as I said to you last night, looking at this panels that you've put together and all the people that you've invited, they're very incredible. So I remember when I was a kid, there used to be this song, one of these things just doesn't belong here, and I kind of feel like that's me.
No, not at all. Not at all. You get your own spotlight. You get your own segment, your own spotlight.
That's just because Jed is my neighbor.
There you go. Well, listen, thank you so much. For those of you watching via Facebook Live, this is the 2017 Grey Cup Summit. Now, we have our